Recording this. Hi, Jenny Xavier here. I am so excited today. I've got a wonderful guest all the way from the USA, Glenn Sanford, who is the CEO of EXP. These guys have something like 89,000 people connected to this beast of a realty service. They're doing amazing things. They're in 20 plus countries. I think they're $1 billion industry. And it was an idea that was born a fair while ago by this man. And I'm sure other people have been involved along the way to bring it to where it is. But Glenn Sanford, welcome to, I guess, Australia, or the Australian market, mate. You're in Vegas at the moment, and you've given up some time to chat with me for about 30 minutes. So I really appreciate that, mate. So Glenn, good morning from Australia and welcome. Tell us a little bit about EXP, because in Australia in particular, it is shaking things up a little bit. It is a different model than what we're used to. It's a different approach. There's a lot of autonomy, a lot of freedom, but there's a hell of a lot of support as well. So give us the 2-minute EXP spiel so we can put everybody in the picture. That'd be great.
Yeah, so thanks, Jed. Thanks for having me here. So EXP Realty is a company I founded in 2009. I had become a real estate agent, or I think you like to say estate agent, in the United States back in 2002. And I did well as an agent, eventually started a real estate team, eventually started a real estate brokerage. And then I recognized all of the things, like in real estate, a lot of times you're sold the idea that you own a business, but for most real estate agents, the business actually owns them, because if they're not out prospecting, if they're not out there talking to clients, they're effectively out of business. And if you're ever around business owners, which I've been around a number of entrepreneurs, business owners, mentors that talked about business, I recognized that this really wasn't a business. It wasn't set up that way. So we went about in 2009 to set up a new model that aligned the compensation of the brokerage with that of the agent, in that they become equity shareholders, they get benefits from recruiting agents to the brokerage, and of course then they go out and list and sell. But it gave them the opportunity to actually build a meaningful retirement in the career of real estate. And I know in Australia, the big way that most agents build retirement is they go and they get rent rolls, and they get, they do investment in other properties, but they can't fundamentally do it in the actual business that they're in the day-to-day of. And so that was really the thing. I recognized that I couldn't fundamentally retire with a meaningful amount of income on the traditional path. And we said, could we invent a new model for real estate? And that's what we did. And started with about 24 agents that came from my original brokerage, and now we're 89,000 agents in 24 countries, the fastest growing real estate brokerage in the world. So it's been a rocket ride.
Mate, that sounds awesome on paper, and I'm sure it is in real life as well, but it would take a hell of a lot of leadership. So the first question I have around that is leadership in 2009 versus leadership now. Over traversing the career that you've had and are still having, what's been the differences that you've noticed, and how have you had to adapt particularly?
Yeah, so one of the things back in 2009, we're a cloud-based residential real estate brokerage, which means that we have no physical offices, no corporate office, and the corporate office in the cloud. And so day one in 2009, I literally told my team, take your computers home. We're going to work entirely remote. This is either going to work or it's not going to work. And if it doesn't work, we're all going to look for work. And that was my first motivational speech to my team. And so we burnt the boats, so to speak, relative to traditional real estate. And we went to work. And back in 2009, I recognized that we needed to build collaboration and community in a different way if we didn't have physical offices. So we actually adopted a metaverse platform in 2009. Wow. So there's a whole bunch of things that we were sort of number one for in terms of doing it first, but also now the largest. We're the largest company in the world using a metaverse to actually run the entire company. So if you go into our Australia office, it's in a metaverse, and I can walk from my office in the US, so to speak, and literally walk across the hall and be in Australia. And so part of this whole thing is, how do you distribute leadership? How do you build a vision that people will want to follow? And there's been leadership challenges, believe me, in that whole journey. There were definitely rites of passage, but I was fortunate enough to have a lot of the building blocks in place day one, just mentally, just in the terms of the framework, that still to this day is still the way we operate today.
Right. And what sort of characteristics of leadership were they, or are those things? And how do you impart those to people? Because it's very autonomous for it to work. And it's like it's disruption before Uber. It's almost before people understood disruption as well. So what are those sort of characteristics of that type of leadership that people watching here? Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah. So one of the things is you need to be present and visible. And so one of my, one of the books that I really loved back in the 80s was In Search of Excellence by Tom Peters and Robert Waterman. It's a phenomenal book. And one of the principles in there is management by walking around, MBWA. And so in a factory type setting, the manager, the CEO, they need to be out, where the people are. And so how do you distribute, if you're cloud-based, how do you do that? And so we call it management by avataring around. So it's an MBAA. And it's around, how do we stay connected? Of course, nowadays, I think leadership, it's both easier and tougher at the same time. It's easier because we have all of these social tools and this ability to really be everywhere, but you have to compete through the noise of all the other people that can use the same tools and technology. So you got to know what you stand for. In my opinion, it needs to be a mission-based business. And it can't be, in my opinion, a P&L based business. A P&L comes way after your mission. Your mission is what people get out of bed to pursue because they believe in something bigger than maybe what other companies are doing in the space. And then, you need to also paint a big enough vision that it can include other people and create opportunities for them as well. And so those are some of the things that, we thought about even back then, is like, is this vision big enough? Are people going to want to be part of it? And is there enough room for everybody to be able to operate in this ecosystem?
Does EXP have a formal type of leadership development program or series that they follow? Is there an ethos behind it? Because it is pioneering sort of new ground, isn't it?
It is. So one of my favorite books on leadership, it's called The Leader's Guide to Radical Management by a gentleman named Stephen Denning. And basically in an uberly connected workforce, which all workforces are connected, but you have to figure out ways to foster autonomous decision making inside the organization. So if you think about any small company, you're an independent contractor or you're an independent business person, a business person of one, you're both the CEO and the technician doing the work. And then the next person you bring in, you get them to do some of the technician work, and you're saying, go do this, go do that, go do this, go do that. But eventually you run out of bandwidth. You can't tell everybody what to do. And so you have to recognize fairly early on that you need to create frameworks for decision making. So if you look at like Leader's Guide to Radical Management, another book that I really love is Scrum, The Art of Doing Twice as Much in Half the Time by Jeff Sutherland. And then there's a number of other books we just added to our board of directors. I'm so proud of this, that we were able to bring on a gentleman named Fred Reichheld. Like, I've got his book here. He's from Bain and Company, but oops, it doesn't show up too well. But Winning on Purpose.
Put it in front of your head, Glenn, and it'll show.
Okay. Can you see it?
There it is.
There it is.
Winning on purpose. Yeah.
Winning on purpose.
Yeah.
So Fred Reichheld invented Net Promoter Score, NPS,
Yeah.
and then he wrote a book called The Ultimate Question 2.0, and using Net Promoter Score, we can empower teams of people to actually understand what our customer, in our case, our agents, actually want and need. And so they're able to take that data and then they're able to work it right into their workflows without it being top down. It's like the OS of the organization, the operating system of the organization, basically self-selects what we should work on next. And so it's just a really great way to distribute leadership and create a framework for decentralized decision making.
Yeah, no, I love that. Way ahead of your time. This is exciting stuff. What keeps you up at night as a leader?
There have definitely been things that have kept me up over time. More recently, things have been pretty calm, but I'll tell you what's keeping up this week. Here in the U.S., there was a sort of a bombshell lawsuit that actually a decision came down against the industry,
right?
And so that one has me a little bit like actually thinking, could this industry, because of the court system, because of the Department of Justice, because of various different things in the U.S., could we fundamentally be seeing a shift in the way the industry operates? And so that has me up quite a bit. But if that wasn't going on, we've actually since about since COVID, it's been pretty smooth sailing. It's really just, which countries do we add? How do we help them become leaders? How do we help them understand how to communicate and prioritize and be able to gather resources so they can actually do things, where they're at? And the cool thing about, again, what we're doing is that really, even though we geographically operate in different countries, the people providing all the back office support can work from anywhere in the world and can be super connected. So I know, like Emily put us together. Well, we're like connected, like there's no distance, even though she's in I think she's in Melbourne, and I'm up in Washington State normally. So it's pretty cool to be able to sort of be that connected.
Yeah, but next time we'll meet in the metaverse, mate. We should do that
For sure.
When you think about the future of EXP and what's going to be required of your leadership, what do you anticipate the pivots that you need to make as a leader, the characteristics that you need to have, the changes that you might need to do as a leader for the future of EXP? Is there anything that sort of comes up?
Yeah, great question. It's probably what I spend more time on than any other thing in terms of thinking about one is the individuals that you're bringing in, and then there's the coaching. But then a term I mentioned earlier, I believe that companies need an operating system, just like your computer needs an operating system. And so for us, it's how do we get the next generational leader needs to buy into the way this way of being. I've talked to so many people, I'm sure you have as well, that they come into the business thinking about it from a profit and loss. What can we sell? What can we charge? How much profit can we make off this product or service? And yeah, those are conversations that need to be had, but those shouldn't be the primary conversation. It should be about building up people. It should be, if you think about, I always think about this whole concept that business is a conduit to relationships, whereas most people think about relationships being a conduit to business. They're knocking on doors for business, right? They're not knocking on doors to build relationships. But if you turn it around and say, no, the purpose of a business is to actually build a relationship with somebody and then to help them over a long haul and think of them as family. And that's a foreign concept to a lot of people in business. And these are sharp people, but they just were exposed to a different way of thinking as they were growing up and getting into whatever schooling or whatever got them to where they're at. But if you think about the whole idea that if you're really building relationships and you're also building loyalty and you're building all of this stuff that allows you to bring into your ecosystem products and services that you can actually charge and make money on, but you're doing it from a position of being of service. So finding people with that same mental framework is super key. Like if you look at me as an individual, 14 years in the business, I'm still the single largest shareholder in the company. And I've met lots of very talented people that all they want to do is build a company and sell a company. And so they're going, I'm gonna start this company, and with 3 to 5 years, I'm gonna spin it out and sell it to somebody. And which is fine. Private equity will buy those companies and this and that, but the customer ends up kind of getting the short end of the stick, because they're basically being leveraged. Whereas if you build something that I have no interest in leaving what I do. I love doing it each and every day. And I think that is, if you can build that type of mindset, then it's not even really work. It's just, it's kind of a labor of love that has a framework around it.
Well, there's plenty of sort of changes around how do we look after the team, how do we look after the worker or the employee, and how do we make it sustainable for them? Whereas in the past, it was more about what do we get out of them, how do we get the most from them, and then pretty much replace them. You talked just before about a particular way of being. Is this sort of approach from EXP to almost future-proof people's life? Because you're not just offering a job or an opportunity, you're offering a way of life that's going to secure their future pretty much forever. And I'd assume they're the generations after that to come. So it's quite individual. Is that something that's part of or innate in you as a leader yourself, or is that something that you sort of caught wind of and thought this is going to be the way that we're going to do business in the future?
Yeah, so there's kind of two parts to that. I'm 57 now. When I was 12, 13 years old, I got exposed to my first personal computer. And what I recognized with the personal computer was that it would handle a lot of repetitive tasks and make things more efficient over time. And that was pretty interesting, kind of see how that worked. And so I've been a tech guy, all of my life. I got into sales and learned the whole sales game as well. The second part of it has to do with that. When I was 17, I got exposed to the first time I ever got exposed to network marketing, or MLM. And again, I'm kind of an entrepreneur. I'm seeing sort of, these concepts. So there's some company called Megatrend's no longer in business, but I was in that. I was in Amway. I was in a number of different companies. And I love two things about it. One, I love that I could be in business without having to take all of the business risk that's normally associated with starting a business. But the second thing is that I recognized in these businesses is that they gave people it sort of up-leveled their thinking, because it opened their eyes to possibilities when they might not have seen it in their day-to-day life. And so they became different versions of themselves. They're more positive, they're more upbeat, they're more collaborative, they're on a mission. And so I recognized that there was something to that. And so I've been involved. I got mentored by a couple of guys back in the 90s that were really big in that industry. And so when I got into real estate, I saw one company had tried a version of it. It didn't work super well. It's still a good company, Keller Williams. But I was like, I think we can make this better. I think we can actually create something that's really meaningful for agents. And we got rid of the physical bricks and mortar, which in real estate, offices is the single biggest expense. and then we were able to leverage staff over a larger number of agents, so we became more efficient. So we could actually take some of that savings and turn it back into what we refer to as our revenue share program, and that really answered a big need. And so and what I did is I called myself a focus group of one. I said, what would it take for me, being an entrepreneur, having the background that I have, what would need to be in place for me to want to hang my license here as an agent? And I just went down, like, it needs to have the revenue share side, it needs to have equity. We're the first company in the history of real estate to share a meaningful amount of equity with our agents and brokers, something like over $1 billion worth of equity at today's value. We've shared with them. Last year, we shared between revenue share and equity $240 million of additional compensation just to agents and brokers who helped us grow. And so for me, it's like I saw what it did for me and how it got me excited and gave me a spring in my step around business. I said, if we do that, we have a potential chance that it will work in real estate. And knock on wood, it did.
Yeah, that's incredible. You've obviously been around some incredible leaders in your life. You're very well read. What sort of, or who has stuck out or stood out, and what has been about them that has done that, and what have you taken from the best of the best that you've had the privilege of being around in your career so far?
Yeah, so my dad was certainly a mentor of mine. He grew a business from an $8,000 investment in 1971 to selling that same business for $3.5 million in 1978. So I got to see entrepreneurship in one. He had a couple phrases, but one that for me I took to heart, which was, it's riskier to take a job than it is to start a business. And which is exactly backwards from what anybody else would ever tell you. And the reason why it was riskier to take a job is because that's the most you'll ever make. Like, you're capped. I mean, you can certainly get some raises and maybe some bonuses and this and that, whatever. Maybe, and for a lot of people that might be fine. But I believe personally that I'd rather be a broke entrepreneur than somebody with a high salary, because with a broke entrepreneur, you get to do things and try things, and you're not locked into a box. So that he was certainly one of my big mentors. There's another gentleman who's since passed. He ran actually for an Australian billionaire, Kerry Packer. He ran a $600 million environmental business for him, a gentleman named Jerry Solberg. And he was an engineer and a business guy, and just hearing how he would mentally construct the various parts of the business and how they all sort of interfaced and worked together in some a logic was a really, really good mentor as well. So those would be a couple of the mentors. I mean, there were certainly some others that were there. The first person I got into real estate with, he was 63, I was 35. He sold 93 properties by himself without an assistant the year before. And so work ethic, that was a big one. Being around people who sell a lot just takes your game up, because you see what can be done. But those are some of the folks. And of course, then there's lots of authors, the Tom Peters and others. Zig Ziglar is a huge fan of. Tom Hopkins, a big sales trainer back in the 80s, 90s. And he and I built a relationship, and got to he's getting up there. But there were so many people that I just read, listened to, and internalized. I'd listen to audios 6, 7, and 8 times just to try to get the nuances of what they were saying into my internal DNA, so to speak.
Do you have an Achilles, Glenn, in your leadership?
Do I have an Achilles?
Yeah, is there
well, I'm sure I do. I got lots of blind spots. The Achilles are the things you don't know. I would say that I was never good at there's a lot of stuff. I'm a jack of a lot of trades, but the thing I nerd out on is organizational design, and sort of how it intrinsically motivates people. Yeah, I'm as distracted as the next person. I always say that I have to build all this stuff to protect me from myself, because left to my own devices, I'd screw it up.
I love that. Is there a time in your career or life, you know, a case study almost where you really, it was really tough and challenging. You had to pull yourself out, because there's a lot of people that would be watching that, you know, been through, you know, tough, challenging times in business. We just had COVID, obviously, globally, and there's a lot of agencies went under in Australia, and particularly, and there's others that are still sort of getting it back together, and so that it can float. Is there a time for you that was really tough that can come to mind that you know showed particular leadership to steer yourself out of that?
Yeah, there are two times. I mean, the first one was 2008. The housing market crashed,
Yep.
and I had 4 offices. The skeleton crew, or we closed down 3. We went to a skeleton crew on the 4th. I found out my assistant left one day without just up and quit, and then I figured out the reason why she quit is because all my credit cards were maxed out and there was no money in the bank, and so I had to quickly raise a bit of money from friends and family to get into 2009 to give us a potential at sort of navigating to the next place. So that was pretty tough. It ended up being the catalyzer to starting EXP. So the whole idea of necessity is the mother of invention absolutely was part and parcel with actually the launch of the company. But then there were rites of passage. 2016, 2017 was a really tough time. In that I brought in somebody who was, in theory, smarter than me in the industry. And at the same time, that person did an end run with me and the board and tried to basically get me generally kicked out of my own company. It was going to give me this little tiny role that was more of a figurehead role. And he was going to run the whole company. And I remember having the conversation with him. And I was telling him, hey, we need to be focused on our net promoter score of agents. This is a really important metric. And he says, I don't manage companies based on NPS. I manage them based on P&Ls. And that was, and then getting a change in that leadership was tough because the board really liked him.
Yeah.
And they liked his style, but it wasn't the mission of the company that I had signed up for. So I had to go and get with my ex-wife and say, hey, you got to vote your shares with me. And that there was a lot of work there, because initially she's like, I like having an independent board. So, well, you can have an independent board, but you won't see me around the company I started. So she agreed that it was better that she helped me write the company. But that was pretty stressful. I mean, I wasn't sleeping. I didn't know which way was up. I didn't know my rights as a founding shareholder in a company that was we were a public company in 2016 with an independent board of directors, and so I didn't know all my rights, and that was a tough time trying to figure out all that stuff.
What were the qualities of your leadership that come to the surface there that got you through that?
Yeah, so I went through what I had a mentor that I connected with. I hired effectively a business CEO coach, and they had a peer group of other CEOs. But he articulated it up very quickly, which is I was having a crisis of confidence. I was the founder, CEO. I knew what the mission of the company was, but at the same time, I was also trying to please people that I respected, because that's the reason I brought them on the board and I brought them in. And so I was trying to do this balancing act of the mission of the company versus including people. And so, there is some value to what I refer to as a beneficial dictatorship, or anyway, there's like there is some benefits to running it less collaboratively when you are the visionary. Like you look at Steve Jobs knew exactly what he wanted.
Yeah.
Elon Musk knows exactly what he wants. Now, sometimes we don't know what he wants, and it doesn't appear that he knows what he wants. But he's very clear. These are the things, and so there's something about a visionary CEO sticking to his or her guns to stay with the mission that they set out to do. And yeah, I had to get comfortable with the fact that I could have lost, and the company might have cratered, and I had to get comfortable with that was one of the outcomes that might have happened by me, taking control.
Yeah, well, powerful story, mate. Couple of quick questions before you go, mate. You have a philosophy on life, mate? What's your sort of take?
Well, life's a do-it-yourself experiment. Yeah, it's I think I refer to myself as a Christian Buddhist.
Yeah.
And I think about that there really are no wrong decisions. They're just I think the wrong decision is indecision, and so I'm more about taking risks, trying things out, seeing what happens. I think life is meant to be experienced, business life as well as anything else. Nobody's going to get 100% of it right, so be good with that. Chances are, if you're really good at business, you might suck at your relationships, or if you are really good at your business and your relationships, you might suck at your health. So, just recognizing that sometimes when you're pursuing something with all your passion, you can't be entirely balanced, and you need to be okay with that. And I haven't always been okay with that, and but I've suffered the consequences of pursuing my dreams. But at the end of the day, I'm like, but that's still what I wanted to do. So, even though there's some shame and guilt that goes along with the other stuff, it's like, but it's still, I still was able to do what I needed to do, and I'm good with that. So coming to terms with the fact that some things need to give when you're pursuing something that you really want to pursue.
Love it, mate. Love it. Last question. Can you sum up leadership in one word?
Leadership in one word. Probably two words: big vision.
Yeah.
Without a big vision, it's hard to be a leader, because without a big vision, you don't actually know where you're leading people to. And so, if you don't have a big vision, I think you can practice personal leadership and be a good person and mentor and do those things. But I think that if you really want to lead a significant group of people, and it doesn't even need to be a big group of people, it's significant for you, you need to have the biggest vision in the room that people buy into.
Yeah, love it. Glenn Sanford, thanks for your wisdom and everything that you're doing in the real estate space, mate, for people. Thanks for your take on business and leadership, and more importantly, thanks for your humble and vulnerable attitude, mate, and your commitment to giving and making those around you more better off. So I really appreciate your time today, mate. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff.